The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, the program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Our guests today, Sally Sibbitt and Terry Haugen-Sjostrom of the Judson Family Center in Minneapolis, will be talking about the use of registered service dogs as therapy animals, helping children and families deal with some of the traumatic problems, stresses in their lives. Dogs, Jodi and her mother Libby, who are registered service dogs, will be joining us as guests on the program today too.
Hello, Sally.
Hi, Terry.
Oh, it's good to have you here today. Who did you bring with you?
Well, let me introduce my special friends,
Yes.
and they're my partners both at home and at work. Sitting on my lap is 8-week-old Jodi, and she is what we call a therapy dog in training.
In training.
She is the daughter of a very excellent therapy dog and my partner at the Judson Family Center with the Family Grief and Loss Program. This is 2-year-old Libby, and she is a registered service dog with Therapy Dogs International, and she is there, as we say, to provide very powerful medicine to help kids and families coming in all sorts of types of life problems.
Well, a service dog. Say more about what a service dog is, and she's certified. What does all that mean?
Well, Libby is certified, as I said, with Therapy Dogs International, and she has passed what's called the American Kennel Club Good Citizenship Test.
Good citizenship.
That's right. She has been well socialized, which is what we're doing with this pup, in all sorts of situations in her younger days with children, with the elderly, with wheelchairs and canes and elevators, and she has been socialized and obedience trained and certified for her temperament that she can work around all kinds of public places and be around people with some assurance that she will help promote animal-human bonding and
Well, she's the kind of dog that we might see in a nursing home then.
That's
or
right.
a hospital. And you use her in the clinic, in a mental health clinic.
That's right. Which is sort of a new approach in the mental health institutional world. But of course to me, in which I've always loved animals, it makes no sense to me to not have animals in a clinic where we have children.
What are the children's response to Libby? And I know that you have another that comes to the office with you named
That's
Sophie.
right, 7-year-old
and
Sophie.
And you have Jodi here in training.
That's right. In about 1.5 years, she'll be more reliable like this one.
But what are the children or the adults? How do they react when they walk in the door and tails wag?
It's really unbelievable. Of course, we have children come to our clinic in all kinds of rough situations.
Oh.
They've lost through death quite often a beloved family member. They may be experiencing a parental divorce, which is so common today. Some of them are undergoing other life transitions and traumas, and they're fearful of even coming in. At the get-go, they're greeted with wagging tails
Yes.
and their eyes bright up with
I'm
animation that there's no way that I could ever recreate in my office.
Right.
Hey, girl.
So the children come in and they're greeted.
They're greeted
in the most
with
warm
wagging
fashion.
tails
Yes.
and welcomed anytime. And so again, it doesn't matter what they look like or what their age, there's somebody glad to see them.
Even if they're my age.
Isn't
There's
that
somebody,
the truth?
yes, okay.
Yes.
Well, now, you have the dogs with you in your office when you work with families, work with kids, and you see kids in groups, too.
That's right.
So what role
That's right.
does the dog play then?
Well,
in a group?
that's there are a number of ways, and some of them are just common sense. But we certainly have scientific evidence that petting a dog reduces stress and relaxes people. And it's just incredible to see those kids coming in, either in group or individually, and they're just petting and petting and petting. And then I can get them to talk because they are petting the dog and sometimes not having to think so hard or be so nervous.
Right.
All right, Libby, sit.
And Libby here, our most beautiful dog, allows that.
Oh, she loves kids. She loves kids, and again, she's been certified. Not all animals would necessarily be appropriate, but many, many are, and she's very responsive. She allows the kids also to give her commands, which sometimes kids are feeling so powerless in their situations, or the youngest in the family, and they want to be able to give a few commands and boss around themselves. So all they have to do is say, Libby, Libby, sit. Libby, sit. Libby, sit. Hey, you're not going to perform for me like you do the kids, huh?
She's going to rest for us.
We'll show you later. All they have to do is give a few commands like shake and lay down
and she performs.
That's right.
And how do the kids treat her? I mean, they lay on her, they touch her, they talk to her?
That's right. They often will talk to Libby where they won't talk to me. And we have a dear story about our grief groups for children in which we form... A grief group is a series of groups for children who have experienced a loss. And
a loss.
Usually through death. Again, we have groups around loss through divorce as well. And there's a real, again, important facet for children who feel so alone in this process to have a group where they can come to and talk with other children. But again, they're not comfortable in the beginning, and this dog helps bind them. In fact, when we try to form group rules in our group, like be private about the information that we're going to talk about, and no interrupting and so forth, the rule the kids consistently come up with is no hogging that dog. They want to take turns and share the dog for their own hug.
No hogging the dog.
That's right. And then,
that's fair.
Yes, we come to a special point in our bereavement groups when there's been a loss. That's a very powerful week where children talk about the actual death of their loved one. And at that time, the children are often quite fearful, and it's a rough time. It's not uncommon at all to pass Libby or Sophie around that group so that they have, just like a teddy bear, only this is a live one that breathes and licks back, to pass around Libby when they tell their story so they have their arms around someone. And we sure know how children respond to touch. And one of the big healing factors for children, and in a way adults as well, is being able to touch and stroke and cuddle. And sometimes kids aren't so comfortable jumping in my lap or even hugging one another, but they certainly will be very comfortable getting that hug and that touch for the dog.
And these dogs must be very good listeners.
They're perfect listeners. They never talk back, which is really great, and they don't lecture, and they don't give instructions. They just lay there and understand.
Well, they must really win the children over, children who are fearful or resistant or reluctant to talk about really difficult things.
They sure do.
Why, what a powerful healing helper you have.
It's the best. I'm convinced it's what makes my work so much more effective.
Wonderful.
And then we get children wanting to come back to, of all things, talk about their problems.
Of course, and that's
because
just what
it's
we're
fun.
about. How in the world did you ever begin this work in your life? I know that you've been a therapist many, many places for years, with a great reputation for working with families and friends for a long, long time.
Well, you're very flattering.
But the addition of Libby and Sophie has been within the past 10 years?
Well, it's really been within the past 2.5 years.
How did that start for you?
Well, as we all come to crossroads in our careers, it came at the same time that we call our curriculum endings to beginnings, and that's, as we say, with every door ending, another door opens. And I came to use the dogs in my work at a similar point in my life.
Wonderful. And I know there's a story about Raspberry here.
There is.
Can you tell us that?
Raspberry, we should say, was one of my beloved 14-year-old dogs that died. And I have for many years spoken on pet loss, both for families and veterinarians and children, because the loss of a pet teaches children a little bit more about death of a human and a lot more about life and coping. At any rate, when my beloved Raspberry died, I wanted to pay tribute to her. And we want to make sure to also teach children it's very important to pay tribute to whomever they've loved, be it animal or be it human being. And through that, I decided to do two things. One is to work again directly with children, only using dogs.
Okay.
And I decided I needed to get a purebred dog and train her and certify her. And I did that when I got Libby. I quit a administrative job I'd had for many years. I was getting farther and farther away from direct work with children, and I decided I'm going to go to work with the dogs. If I'm not going to be staying home or working administratively, I'm going to take the dogs to work and spread this very powerful animal-human bond, which is quite a passion with me.
Well, what a wonderful dream, and you're pursuing it.
I'm pursuing
with great
it.
energy.
Well, it's just great because it's so successful. And what's so wonderful is that I've been in several settings using these animals, and with each setting, these are institutions and social service agencies and the Judson Family Center. All sorts of logistical arrangements have been made through building permits and lots of meetings, and the dogs have been accepted, and not only accepted, at this point they're really embraced in all the settings that we work in, which is wonderful. And that's why I need several therapy dogs now, because at Judson Family Center I'm not the only one that uses them. We have to schedule sessions with the dogs now because they're so powerful. The other therapists are getting on board.
And so in your office you have the water dish and the food dish and the dog toys, because they are part of your daily work there.
That's for sure.
And then you bring them home at night.
And then they come home at night. That's right.
And they're part of your family there.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Wonderful.
I think you can't separate out. Human beings can do a lot to help human beings, but part of the philosophy underpinning much of our work at Judson Family Center is also a little more holistic, and it's a link to nature and to animals as well that provides much of the healing that sometimes people just can't do for one another.
Well, it sure feels good to play with her here. I'm really enjoying Libby a lot. How are you? I wanted to show Sally's book here. Do you want to say something about this? I
sure can. Actually, this was another tribute to that raspberry dog that died, and that is I wrote a book for families or adults. You like the book, don't you, Libby? Experiencing pet loss, and it's called "Oh, Where Is My Pet Gone?" And it's a workbook for families to be able to work through the grief and the loss, and also to commemorate the memories.
So you have specific steps in the book to help take care of the loss issues.
That's right.
Step-by-step kind of.
That's right.
But it's a memorial too.
It's a memorial because that's one of the most important parts of grief that we really stress in our work, and that's remembering our beloved pet or person in that manner and never having to forget. So the book actually starts out recalling all the memories that a family has with their pet, from the first time they saw their pet to how they named their pet, to remembering the mischief, to vacations, to all the seasons of the year with their animal. And once they have all those memories down, then we talk a little bit more about loss and grief and what that feels like, and did they have a funeral, and
saying goodbye.
Saying goodbye.
I see. Okay.
The hard part.
Well, in this book, who typically would use this?
Actually, anybody could use it. It's used in schools sometimes with the school counselor, and many classrooms have pets, and many teachers say a child comes to school devastated because their animal at home has died. Oh, of course. And it's in schools. Individual families, it's in veterinarians' offices as well.
Veterinarians too.
That's right, because they have a rough time helping families cope with this, so they have the book available.
Great, great. Well, let's look at some of the pages in the book and see what kinds of things you might ask a child to do, whether it's as they use this book or in a group, to help acknowledge their loss, realize how important it is to them, say goodbye, and then I guess the next step is being willing to love again, isn't it? after there's a loss.
That's the final task.
Right, right. I like this one. It says, describe your pet's personality. That's kind of fun.
And it's very open-ended. They can say whatever they want, and combined with that is describe your pet's talk. And everybody says their pet goes or yip or whatever. Everybody has a remembrance of the sound.
Tell me about this page, the goodbye page. What are you doing here?
The goodbye page really helps children and families to celebrate the fact that they are masters of changes and goodbyes already.
Oh, masters of changes and goodbyes.
And
pretty
that's
powerful sounding.
That's a very important concept, and I think as an adult, the older I get, the more I realize how many goodbyes we have to say, and can appreciate for children that there are many kinds of goodbyes. Some are small, like saying goodbye to mom and dad and going to school. Some are big, like moving, or certainly a divorce or a death. And those are the big ones. But if a child or anybody can appreciate all the ways in their lives that they've already said goodbye, they can sort of pat themselves on the back and say, wow, I've done this before. I guess I've done it on the smaller goodbyes, and I can do it on this big one too.
So what you're doing is helping people acknowledge the pet loss and learn from that to help manage future loss in life.
Exactly.
Great.
Exactly.
Now, what are some of those goodbye rituals like? I know you've talked to so many families around so many loss issues, that there's a rich kind of collection, I think, that I hear you talk about sometimes about what people do to acknowledge the importance of someone or thing or dream that they've lost.
Well, what's so wonderful is that it's as individual as a person or family wants to make it.
Okay.
And we certainly know in the face of human death, we have many socially prescribed rituals.
Well, like a
wakes
funeral.
And funerals.
Right.
But those do it at the time of a death, but don't always do it for what we're talking about, a family's special days and holidays, ongoing birthdays or ongoing holidays. And many families, through our work with them or advice, create their own rituals about what they're going to do to remember their special person on maybe Christmas or on a birthday. And it really varies from a family sitting down and taking a walk together and talking of memories to saying prayers with a candle lit, to writing a letter or opening a photo album. But we very much encourage rituals, and believe it or not, we encourage rituals in the face of divorce and pet loss. They were described for a purpose, and that's so that children and adults as well don't feel isolated and alone when they're missing someone that they love very much.
Well, that sounds really powerful to me. As I hear you talk, I'm thinking of all the different kinds of rituals we have just to mark special events, but how quiet it is when there's a loss of a dream or a person, and there just don't seem to be as many ways to mark the event.
That's right, and not as much
children.
Support
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. Yeah, what fun. What does the professional community think of your work with using dogs in your therapy with families and kids?
So far, it's really going great guns.
Great.
In fact, I've been doing a number of trainings with other professionals on both pet-assisted therapy in bereavement counseling, and get many, many comments about how do I get it started. And that's one of my big hopes, is that through not only my work with the children directly, but other professionals, they'll get their brains rolling and figure out a way to bring animals into their institutions as well.
Well, that's wonderful. But you've had, I know you've done a lot of public speaking and professional groups and conferences, and that you receive calls frequently from people who are interested. And the professional conferences just stir more and more of that up,
yes,
don't they?
Yes, it's
That's
very
wonderful.
exciting.
That's wonderful.
And it's an old concept that animals do a lot for people. And it's just operationalizing that.
That's great.
Uh-huh.
I was wishing and hoping that you would talk to us about an experience you had where there was a fire at a dog kennel. You were called in, I think, once to help with that. Can you tell us about that?
I was. But let me try and call that Libby over. Hey, Libby! Libby, come!
Here she comes.
Would you come over and tell us about that sad, sad event that we got called in to help on? About a year ago, in 1991, there was a tragic kennel fire in the Twin Cities area, and 46 family pets were suddenly killed while families were on vacation.
Oh, what a disaster.
And as devastating for each family involved was for the family-owned kennel owners who, by accidents, teenage sons had inadvertently played with matches in the area and indirectly was the cause of this terrible fire.
Oh, my.
That's a good girl. Down. And the kennel called us at that point to come in and see what we could do to help those families.
So the kennel called you to see if you could be of assistance to the families as they returned to pick up their pets who were not there.
That's right.
Oh, my.
That's right. And we were then available individually to families, but we held a few meetings. And again, the power of coming together with other grieving people in some form of commemoration was really, really important. And we came together and had a session with families about the grief and the trauma involved in losing a pet so suddenly and actually so violently.
Right.
And then to talk about the grief. And we did that together, and we broke the children up for a while separately from the parents.
Oh.
And it was a very, very poignant and difficult time.
A lot of tears, I bet.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right.
Reminds us all of how difficult it is when we lose someone we love, isn't it? Really hard. But better to be with people than be alone.
That's exactly right.
I would think anyway.
That's exactly
I
right.
would think
And they
so.
certainly expressed that.
That's great. Now, you also work with a program called Helping Paws.
Yes,
What's
I
that about?
tie animals into most facets of life these days. Helping Paws is an organization, nonprofit organization in Minnesota that pairs service dogs with the physically disabled. In fact, one of that little Jodi, the puppy's other sisters, was just donated to Helping Paws. And these little puppies go to foster homes at the age of 7 weeks and are trained for 1 to 2 years. Very intensive training, and at the end of that are paired with someone, typically lives most of their life in a wheelchair. And for example, when they drop an object, they say, pick it up, and the animal will pick it up. They allow these individuals to get out to work. They help them open doors, retrieve messages, turn on and off lights.
Oh, wonderful.
Open the refrigerator.
They have a life.
That's right.
They
The
really-
independence and
Yes.
companionship that are afforded are just instrumental in continuing to empower individuals like this.
Can you say a little more about the kind of training program that goes into this for yourself and for the dogs?
For Helping Paws, it's very intensive training because these dogs are actually street certified, very similar to seeing eye dogs and hearing dogs. And by law, these dogs are then allowed in all public places. But it's very intense training of socialization in all kinds of ways, very similar to what we do in our work, but more specific retrieving of even a dime dropped off the floor. They're in grocery stores, they're in malls.
And what about the therapy dogs? Is their training as extensive or more so?
The retrieving pieces aren't as critical in my work. We're appealing to the emotions and psychological and social
piece,
aspects of children.
Okay.
So the dogs certainly need training about coming and laying down, and they also put things in their mouths and deliver messages to children.
Oh, they do?
And so some retrieving, but not anywhere near the amount of accuracy that's involved in the true street certified service dog.
Well, the thing that I love, because I've seen you with your dogs and been in the office with you with your dogs, is the welcome I get when they come in the door. When I come in the door, and their vulnerability and their trust and their total openness to me. You know, I've never heard a bark. I've never heard a growl. You know,
It
they're
feels
wonderful.
pretty good, doesn't it?
Feels awfully safe and warm.
Yes, and this old world is lacking lots of that kind of loyalty and unconditional acceptance. And so it's wonderful to get it wherever we can.
That's right. And the children in your therapy groups, they must remember the dogs.
They really, really do.
Yeah.
It's and for so many children who have lost someone, as we've talked about, it's a nice parallel sometimes, and it's a little bit of treating these dogs like people. But for example, in an adoption situation that I'm working with, where a child had to be separated from her mother but remembers her, every week she tells Libby, Libby, are you missing your mother? I'm missing my mother, because after all, Libby's mother couldn't take care of her either, and she had to come live with another family who could take much better care of her, and that's me. So the little child has quite a sympathy right from the get-go with what this dog must be going through. And each week we'll say to this little girl, are you missing your brothers and sisters? Or do you think Libby's missing her brothers and sisters? And she'll say, yes. Do you have any advice for Libby of how to cope and what to do when she feels upset? And she'll say, yes, you can think about them, Libby. She'll whisper in Libby's ear, Libby, you can think about your brothers and sisters anytime you want.
They're right in her heart then with her memories.
That's right. And she'll say, and you can dream about them.
Wonderful.
And then she'll say, time to time, she'll write letters to Libby's mother, Sonny. She knows Libby's mother, Sonny, as well as she knows her own mother. And we'll write letters that I miss you and I still love you. And after each session, she leaves Libby and she says to Libby, Libby, I can't see you this next week, but I'm not going to forget you, and I'm going to remember you in my heart.
Wonderful.
And she begins each session with, Libby, I remembered you even though I couldn't call.
I'm back and you're here.
That's right. So some of the parallels are really fun to work with.
Well, you've given me a lot to think about here today in terms of loss and kids and attachments to animals, things that I haven't really thought about frequently. What advice would you give to people as they look at enriching their lives and being helpful to themselves and to children around loss issues?
Wow, there's so much to say here, and of course that's our life work, and it certainly doesn't just encompass utilizing animals in nature, but there's so much to learn through loss. Again, we call it endings to beginnings because we see some very rich little beings develop with the need for much communication with families. So I would certainly say to parents, it's a time to enhance family communication and talk about feelings and teach feelings. Through loss, families are wide open. They're raw and they're vulnerable.
They hurt.
And they can start some new patterns of relating very closely through this rough time as well. So that open communication and sharing feelings is critical.
Great.
It's also an opportune time for both individuals, children and adults, to learn what helps them cope. And in this book, for example, we talk about children often show their feelings through their bodies. They just don't sit and talk like we're doing. They show it in their bodies, and there's a checklist. How do you show your grief? And they say kick, yell, scream, cry, sit on lap, suck thumb, and they can begin to link up some of their actions with some of their feelings, and it also can help parents understand that why their child may be crying more or temper tantruming more, they're just expressing those very big feelings that the adults have as well, but the adults know a little bit easier how to put them out of their mouths.
What about the poem that you've told me about before? Can you finish off with sharing that with us?
Well, there's a wonderful poem that underpins much of the philosophy of my work with animals and with people. And that really was a wise old Indian chief. We have so much to learn from the American Indians about linking ourselves with nature and animals. And that goes, what is man without the beasts? If all the animals should die, man would die of great loneliness of spirit. For whatever happens to the animals also happens to man.
Oh, thank you, Sally, for being with us today.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
And Miss Libby and Jodi, too. Thank you.
Certainly, service dogs such as Libby and Jodi can help children and families cope with many of the traumatic problems they faced. A new approach to therapy for families. Thank you, Sally Sibbitt, Terry Haugen-Sjostrom, Libby and Jodi. Thanks to all of you for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library. in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency. We thank you for watching, and we hope you visit your public library often.